Hello my friends and welcome back to Chess with Constantine. I hope everybody had a lovely Christmas and has great plans for a wonderful new year. I don't know if you all noticed, but chess.com has re-released several of the more popular bots, and the bot that really got me started on this channel, Mittens, the infamous cat of the internet, has made its appearance once again. So of course, naturally I could not resist, and I had to try to play this new and updated version of Mittens to see if we could repeat our previous feat of defeating it twice last time. This time, I must say, chess.com team did a great job in improving that bot. Despite my kind of specialty of playing against computers, it is quite a bit stronger than it was last time. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to beat it yet. My record so far is 3 losses and 3 draws. But I did want to share with you one of the draws I had against this bot to demonstrate that still there are some weaknesses in computer play that perhaps a human player would never have. Let's jump right into the action. As you can see, I've played pawn to f4, and you may recall that I won handedly in my very first video with this opening. And we have the move pawn to g6. In my opinion, it is a suboptimal move. Certainly it's flexible, but if you want to play for win with black, certainly against the person, you should be playing e5 here. And if you want to have a more solid setup without gambiting material, then you should really be looking into pawn to d5. But okay, Mittens decided to go for the modern line with pawn to g6. Then we had pawn to d4, immediately grabbing the center, bishop to g7, pawn to e3. This is, by the way, my favorite setup. The reason why I like here pawn to e3 rather than pawn to e4 is that after the natural knight to f6, with pawn e3, there's actually no pressure here on the e-pawn, and there is no need to try to protect any material. Rather, if you play pawn to e3, you will have this nice wedge formation, and the e-pawn will be defending both the d4 pawn and the f pawn. So you get kind of a reverse Stonewall setup there. For those of you who follow the Dutch defense. So then we had knight to f6, natural move from black, and I seized more space with pawn to c4. There is no pressure on white to immediately deal pieces. Rather, it's more important to solidify control of the central squares. White will be playing knight to c3 in the near future, and as well as knight to f3, and there's absolutely nothing black can do to stop that plan. So it's actually pawn to c4 is actually stronger than playing a knight f3 or knight c3 right away. Mittens, the notorious kitten, decided to play solidly and castle. Then I just played knight to f3, and then we had pawn to c6, preparing the move d5. Knight to c3, and now pawn to d5. Here, as white pieces, and this is, by the way, all theory, hundreds and hundreds of games have been played at various levels in this opening, many of them at the higher levels of rating, and none of this is really new. So here, in this position, white had to make the first major decision of the game. And do you want to capture this pawn, or do you want to try to do something else? if white decides to capture, the idea will be that after pawn takes pawn and pawn takes pawn, for example, black will have a semi-isolated d-pawn. What do I mean by semi-isolated? Well, what I mean is this d-pawn on d5 could potentially become a target, and black will have to think about really how to defend that pawn against white's attacks. So if black decides to, for example, play a natural move like pawn to e6 to defend it, then black is going to have a problem with this white squared bishop. All right, pawn to e6 would block this diagonal, and so the question becomes, well, what does black do with this bishop? So after capture and capture, if black decides, for example, to play bishop to f5 first before playing e6, then that will be vulnerable potentially to attacks on this bishop, which can include but are not limited to the ideas with pawn to h3 followed by g4, as well as the ideas of knight to h4 with an attack on the bishop as well. So that bishop could become a target after moves like bishop to f5, and of course moves like bishop to g4 would run into that pawn to h3 move right away, where if you retreat you could easily lose a piece after pawn to g4. So black really has a problem in this bishop, and it's not always clear where to put it. So with that in mind, I decided to take the pawn with the idea that I'm going to be pursuing pressure on this pawn, and also possibly attacks on that white squared bishop. So I played knight to e5. The idea behind knight to e5 is to place a knight on an active square, certainly occupying the center with a centralized knight. It could be a good strategy, and if black plays something like knight to c6, white always has the option of capturing that, giving them a backward pawn. But also in the event, let's say I ignore that, and then you have like knight takes knight from somewhere, and then after f captures the piece, white can block off this diagonal semi-permanently. So a move like knight to e5 is just a good move. Also, knight can be repositioned to the d3 square later on, and also it frees up the squares for white's light squared bishop as well. So the bishop can be placed on f3 or also on g2, depending on what white feels like doing. So here we had the move knight to c6. I did not elect to trade pieces here. Instead, I played bishop to e2 with the idea bishop to f3. I'm not afraid of knight captures knight because, again, f takes on e5 will be blocking off the diagonal for black's powerful dark squared bishop. And if black played something like a knight to e4, then the trading of those knights should lead to a fairly quick draw. So black elected an interesting approach here. I mentioned to you earlier what to do with the white squared bishop, and here Mittens played the move bishop to e6, which looks kind of awkward, to be honest. I mean, it does get the bishop out of the way, but this bishop can be a target for knights on, for example, g5 or f5, or c5, and also it just kind of looks awkward, awkwardly placed on this square. So we have a continuation of the natural move with bishop to f3, attacking the cat's d-pawn. h5, a move I don't really understand, but some kind of deep computer move, I suppose, to gain space and maybe prevent white from continuing the attack, which is h3 and g4. I'm not really sure the point behind h5, but okay. h5 was played. I simply castled here. Then we had the move rook to c8. So far, nothing earth-shattering or spectacular. I just played bishop to d2 to develop my bishop. Then we had the move queen b6. Notice the b2 pawn is now being under attack. So I saw here an opportunity to place my other knight on a very active square. So I saw this maneuver, knight to a4 followed by knight to c5. After knight a4, notice that the queen is under attack and as well as this pawn being defended. So Mittens followed up with a queen to c7. Then I placed the knight on a very active square. Notice that now that my knight is positioned on c5, black's bishop on the white squares is now a target. And I'm threatening knight takes e6, doubling black's pawns, creating a very attractive backward pawn target here, and also gaining the advantage of two bishops versus a bishop and a knight, which in most circumstances should provide for better endgame chances. So that's a threat. I'm not really afraid of b6. That move is ignoring what I am trying to do, but also creates potential weaknesses here for black on the queen side. So Mittens responded with bishop to f5. Ordinarily, I would be looking at maneuvers like pawn to h3 followed by g4. I suppose pawn to h5 has put somewhat of a damper on that, although that approach could still be considered. But I decided not to get too fancy and simply played rook to c1, kind of looking at the queen, activating the rook, and again, I'm not afraid of knight takes knight because that will be met with pawn takes knight. So after this, notice all of white's pieces are actively placed and are doing quite well. So queen to b6 was played by the cat, and I decided, hey, what the heck, let's push this pawn so that this b2 pawn is no longer a target. So there's no more threat of queen takes, and all of my pieces are quite well placed, so I'm not really afraid of anything. Mittens activated his other rook with rook f to d8, and then I decided, hey, this queen presents an attractive target, so let's chase it. So I played knight to a4, queen to c7, and now just repeat the moves with knight to c5. So Mittens played queen b8, and now I found a very nice tactic, a very cute tactic in my opinion. And you can pause the video if you feel like trying to find it, but really it's knight to a6 here. The reason why this is such a cute move is obviously I'm attacking the queen, but pawn takes knight is impossible, because if black plays, for example, b takes, then this knight is hanging, and actually white is winning here. After I recapture the knight and I have this fork. So it's impossible to take, and I just played this, and after that, queen really has to move. So queen to d6 was played, and I just repeated the moves. Now the threat is capturing this pawn. And just like that, we simply had a draw by 3-move repetition in 22 moves. against a bot rated more than 3000. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is how you can play a very strong computer and have a draw, or even have winning chances. The trick is not to exchange material if you can help it, to keep the position as closed as you can, and that will maintain the complexity of the position and prevent the computer from overwhelming you in calculating tactics. So here, yeah, just seize the space and maintain subtle pressure on your opponent until you get a chance to have a draw. I still have not given up beating this cat, and certainly if it played the correct variation that I know quite well, I think that that victory will be possible. The problem is that with the latest version of this bot, they included quite a bit of randomness, so it's not quite easy to catch this computer with its pants down, so to speak. The computer will be able to handle almost any opening system, and you can't really outplay it with preparation. But this is still a valid approach to play such computers. I hope you learned something from this game. Until next time, and Konstantin out.